I sat next to the weird kid on the first day of middle school. During first period, as the teacher droned on about timetables, he incrementally shifted his chair towards me and whispered in my ear. My family had just moved to the town from a different state and had less than a week to settle in before school began. I was a small, timid 12-year-old girl with big glasses, joining as a new student in the 7th grade. The type that wouldn't talk unless I was spoken to and do exactly what I was told. The gullible type to naively take everything at face value. I never had many friends, and I figured my prospects weren't great at this new school either. All the kids had a year to know each other already, and friendship groups seemed pretty much formed. Still, I was observant to their interactions, enough to realize this kid was most definitely the outcast. Too anxious to look at him, I stared wide-eyed towards the front and shook my head slowly. "It's true," he continued. "He's got long, sharp, crooked teeth and smells of pee and rotten fish. One of his eyes is missing, he's just got an empty socket there." Ironically, pee and rotten fish was exactly what this kid smelled like. I tried not to breathe in as he leaned in even closer. He's sensing my fear, I thought, as I tried to stay as still as possible. Nobody else seemed to notice us at the back of the class next to the window. If he catches you alone, he'll grab you and take you somewhere no one will find you. He'll shove things in your butthole from where you poop. He made a scratching sound with the end of his ruler on my desk. Krk, krk. I crossed my legs tightly as I cringed in my seat. "And laugh when you scream. When he's had his fun, he'll cut you up and dump you in Stanville Creek. If you don't believe me, I can show you later. You can see bones in there if you look closely." Stanville Creek was a pond in a wooded area of town. On the way to school and back from my house, there was a sign pointing to a trail that disappeared into the depths of the woods. It read, "Stanville Creek 1.5 mi," indicating that it was a 1.5-mile walk away into that dark abyss. I later found out that it wasn't really a creek per se, just a large stagnant body of water inhabited by a lot of wildlife. The misnomer originated from its previous branching into the town's main river, but industrial works had somehow isolated it. He poked my face with the sharp end of the pencil, and I accidentally let out a loud yelp. "Stop messing around at the back," shouted the teacher. Everyone turned to look at us, and my face flushed red. The weird kid moved his seat back, grinning at me from ear to ear. I glanced at him for the first time. He was pale and lanky, with long, greasy black hair that almost covered his eyes and ran in strips down to his shoulders at the back. A snot booger hung from his left nostril. He had dark eyebrows and wore a green sweatshirt that was too big for him, with untied laces trailing from his dirt-covered black and white sneakers. For the rest of the day, he would periodically stick his tongue out at me and make scratching noises with a pencil on his desk. At lunch, he sat alone on a bench and kept staring at me. When it came time to go home, he was waiting to torment me again at the school gate. "The murderer's gonna get you," he mumbled as I walked past. "He likes little girls just like you. You're not gonna make it home today." Terror engulfed me, and my knees went weak. I backtraced my steps to the school gate and stared at him with bulging eyes. "Scaredy cat," he mumbled, and started walking away. Instinctively, I followed him. The killer can't take me if I'm not alone, I thought. He turned around. "Stop following me," he growled. He kept walking. I kept following him, and he turned around again. A wicked idea popped into his mind, and he flashed a grin. "Want to hear a story?" I looked at him blankly, which he evidently took as a yes. He continued walking. I noticed he had a slight limp as I followed behind him. About 50 years ago, there was a really nice teacher working at our school called Mrs. Derry. She actually taught in our class. Anyway, she married one of the other teachers, and they had 3 kids who went to the school. One day, they got divorced, and he got the kids. They all told her she had to leave the school on the last day of that year. When the next year started, she wasn't there. He paused for dramatic effect. Guess where she went? A different school? I said quietly. Nope. A new job? Nope. A different country? Wrong again. On the first day, a girl noticed a bad smell coming from the storage room outside the lunch hall. You know, the one with the door painted red. She opened the door to have a look. He paused again dramatically as I remembered walking past that same red door earlier. And she saw Mrs. Derry's dead, rotting corpse hanging from her neck off the ceiling. He grinned as my eyes widened, gleeful as he watched the psychological damage he had inflicted with a single sentence. I was walking shakily on autopilot, still trailing behind him. I inched closer to him as we walked past the Stanville Creek sign. It was only a 15-minute walk back to my place. If my house hadn't been on the way to his, I probably would have ended up following him home. I'm gonna go now, I trembled as we walked past my house. He ignored me and just kept walking away. I looked around like a deer and sprinted up the front steps, where my mom let me in. "Hey, sweetie, how was your first day?" "Good," I said, still trembling. I walked briskly past her and up the stairs to my room, curling up in a ball on the floor. All I could think about that night was what I would find if I opened that red door outside the lunch hall, and how someone could die by being hanged from their neck. The next day, I sat beside the weird kid again, whose name was Will. He kept making faces at me every time I looked in his direction. Thankfully, we had different classes later in the morning, but even when he wasn't there, it was as if he had infested my mind. I still couldn't concentrate, and kept thinking about the serial killer and the teacher he'd told me about yesterday. At lunch, I walked past the dreaded storage room and stood outside the red door for a moment. I heard Will's voice behind me. "I dare you to open it," he grinned. "Hey, I'll give you a $5 if you open it." I reached for the handle, being in my nature to do as I was told. He came closer. In that moment, we were alone in the corridor. I turned the handle and pulled the door open just wide enough. Suddenly, I felt a strong push behind me. I stumbled into the storage room, and the door slammed behind me as footsteps darted away. It was pitch black in there. A foul, sweaty odor marinated in the warm humidity. I gagged and banged on the door as I fumbled around for the handle, but couldn't open the door no matter how hard I tried. It slowly dawned on me that I was locked inside a room where someone had hanged themselves. I looked into the darkness. Then I heard the sound of something swinging, looked up and thought I saw a mangled, decomposed face looking down at me with a noose around its neck. I began screaming, "Help! Help! Help me!" I shrieked. I banged on the inside of the door as hard as I could, but no one came to save me. I kept shrieking for a good 10 minutes, banging with my hands and elbows like my life depended on it, which I thought it did. Finally, it opened. I fell into the cleaning lady's arms, pale and hyperventilating. My knuckles were beaten raw. "My goodness, how did you get in there?" "I got stuck," I said, dazed. "You poor thing." She patted my head and left. Will greeted me again at the school gates, a sick grin plastered on his face. I wanted to avoid him, but at the same time, I was now deathly afraid of walking home alone. "That was hilarious," he laughed. "Did you even hear yourself? You sounded like a dying monkey, or a dolphin or something." I grimaced as we started walking. "So, did you see a dead body in there?" He taunted. I nodded. "Really? Well, you better hope it's not hiding under your bed tonight." He smirked. I remained silent as ever. We walked for a minute, then he suddenly stopped and pointed at a window of the hospital close to the school. "There's an old woman living in that room, right there," he said. "She's lying down so you can't see her, but sometimes she'll sit up and stare at you out of the window with 100 tubes coming out of her and all." He motioned with his hands as I looked away quickly. "Then," he continued, "when the sun sets, she sometimes climbs out of the window and finds people walking alone on the street. Kids, adults, old people, anyone. Then she claws out their necks with her nails and sucks their blood until they're dry." My middle school days pretty much continued like this. I was traumatized for a while after the storage room incident, but I was afraid that Will do something worse if I tried to avoid him.